The global and regional trends on economy and security are changing, and so are the regional dynamics and alliances as well. Pakistan has embarked on a mega economic activity, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Both China and Pakistan would be working on this economic activity. Pakistan has been improving its relations with the neighboring countries. Recently, we saw the Russian top officials, military officials visiting Pakistan. That is unprecedented. Pakistan is improving its relations with Iran. The Iranian military chief was visiting Pakistan, and Pakistan has also been working and collaborating with the regional countries on the issue of Afghanistan. Pakistan has been fighting extremism and terrorism successfully, and also Pakistan wants the Afghan government to reciprocate the same. Today we are going to discuss about Pakistan's foreign policy and the prospects for peace and stability in the region. Today we are joined by our special guest in the studios. Our first guest is Mr. Rana Athar Javed. He is running a think tank, Pakistan House, in Islamabad, and is a renowned analyst on Pakistan's foreign policy. Welcome to the show, sir. Our second guest is Mr. Andrew Krybkov, and he is a Moscow-based political analyst and expert on the Eurasian affairs. Welcome to the show, Mr. Krybkov. Mr. Rana Athar Javed, starting with Pakistan's foreign policy, recently we have seen that Pakistan has been improving its relations with Russia, interestingly. I'll start with Russia because Russian military officials were visiting Pakistan. Also, there were some joint military drills as well, which were practiced in Pakistan. How do you see Pakistan-Russia relations and the regional prospects and challenges?
Thank you very much, Taimur. I think it is the most important topic in the contemporary foreign policy history of Pakistan. Because Pakistan, we already had relations with, of course, the Western countries, the United States, and they have been our friends for decades. What Pakistan has achieved in the recent times is Pakistan has established a framework of relationship in which we have no preferential order, really. They are all mutually inclusive relationship. And Russia and Iran actually tops the list. The challenges we had were how to balance a policy in the Middle East, which we, I would say, by the grace of Almighty, we have managed to achieve a balance in terms of application of our foreign policy contours and also engaging them, in both Russia and Iran, on a permanent basis. In respect to Russia, you mentioned about the senior military officials were here, and our senior military officials, others visited Moscow, and Russia has been very forthcoming. Russia also, for not only for Pakistan, Russia has also understood that in South Asia, there are not only one country Russia had a relationship. As we said, it's a mutually inclusive. Russia had great relation with India in the past, and as Pakistan has been stating that what Pakistan wants from major powers in South Asia and otherwise, to understand the Pakistan's importance, geostrategic importance, and for Pakistan to have a balanced relations both from South Asia, like we are saying, and also in Central Asia with Russia, what it will bring on the table for both countries that Pakistan has been, very grateful to Russia when they managed to build steel mill in Pakistan, and it became a symbol of our friendship. Of course, we had a gap and a political, a different interest. But at the moment, the national interests of both countries are converging. And this means that also Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and China, they are converging on a very important geostrategic peace and stability point. Right. That point of agreement doesn't really, I would say, undermine any other country's interest. And Pakistan has categorically stated that establishing relation with Russia does not mean that there is any problem, our relation with the United States or any other Western country for that matter. So we have managed to establish this framework. Russia is forthcoming, and so is Iran. So it is the start of a good era which would produce results in terms of trade, economic cooperation, strategic cooperation, gas and oil, and it has a comprehensive plan composed in it, actually, I would say.
Right. And Andrew, this is very important. Pakistan's relations with Russia, with the regional countries. But at the same time, when we talk about the prospects for development, the opportunities that are there, we also talk about the challenges. Uh, Afghanistan at the moment, we see, is a big challenge for the regional countries. More terrorist organizations have been operating inside Afghanistan. And what has brought Russia closer to Pakistan is Pakistan's approach towards Russia, but at the same time, the challenges that are there. Daesh has become a new challenge for all the countries in the region. How do you see Afghanistan and the issue of terrorism?
I see the Russian-Pakistani rapprochement as being motivated first and foremost by shared security interests in Afghanistan. As you mentioned, Daesh's entrance into the conflict has changed the paradigm completely. Because of that, the Russian and Pakistani militaries decided to cooperate, and I believe October 2016 was the date of the first joint military drills, and I find that to be mutually rewarding for both parties. Russia has direct experience fighting Daesh in Syria, whereas Pakistan has direct experience fighting terrorists in the mountainous border region. Whereas Russia has more contemporary experience with this threat, Pakistan has experience fighting the threat in that geography, which could be very useful to Russia in protecting the Northern Caucasus, which are under threat from Daesh from time to time, or so Daesh wants to say. Now, I think that what's happening in Afghanistan, it does affect everybody, not just Pakistan, but the Central Asian republics. And we shouldn't forget that neighboring Tajikistan is involved in the CSTO with Russia. Therefore, Russia has mutual security commitments to that country. I don't think it's a coincidence that Russia and Tajikistan just staged military drills along the Afghan border. Now, granted, the pretext for that was said to be to guard against a so-called Taliban scenario, but I personally believe, in my private capacity, this is really to guard against any possible Daesh scenario. Now, with Tajikistan being on the front lines and therefore extending Russia's security commitments at the Afghan border, Pakistan being in the same position, I think it's only natural that both parties are cooperating, sharing experiences with one another, and trying to engage in a new multilateral peace process led by Moscow and involving all stakeholders, including, most recently, the invitation to involve the Taliban.
Right, and Pakistan working with Russia and China, Iran for that matter, these countries, Mr. Rana, looking at this threat from Daesh very seriously. Why 17 years on, the forces in Afghanistan couldn't keep a check on the terrorist organizations? And what can the regional countries do? We have seen Pakistan successfully fighting terrorism and extremism. We have launched big military operations. But do we expect that the forces in Afghanistan would do the same? Or how do you see the issue of Afghanistan and terrorism?
No, I think you already said it. There are challenges. This is one of the biggest challenges, that you have a country of the most modern military weaponry and strategists, military advisor on the ground, but they unfortunately failed to produce the results what they said that we will. So this is one. Second challenge which I foresee is that stabilizing Afghanistan is in interest of everyone, every country of the world, including Pakistan, Russia, China, and Iran. Bringing all these four countries into the fold of facilitating or making more concessions in terms of negotiations. When I say concessions, that doesn't mean concession. That means political negotiation need to have some clear agenda. Whether you want to use stick and carrot, or you want to understand the complexity on the ground. In my view, the United States and other countries are realizing that if they involve more stakeholders like Russia, China, and Pakistan, Iran, it would only reduce the burden, sheer burden which the US and NATO forces are facing on the ground. And secondly, very importantly, that the two-thirds territory which is being controlled by Taliban is not disputed by the Afghan government, is not disputed by all the Western forces. So what should be then the result? What should be the way forward? The way forward to me is that if they want China, Russia as silent observer, but be part of the process, and Iran and Pakistan especially facilitating the negotiation, which I sometimes say that Pakistan's sway over Taliban is very, I think, misconceived in terms of contemporary terms and also glorified a lot. Taliban have their own interest, this is their country. Pakistan has really no great sway over them. It is only by sheer understanding of both parties that if there is a trust. Iran has played a major role recently in galvanizing Taliban leadership. So why not use Iran? Why not ask Iran? Iran has stakes in Afghanistan. It has on the Suba, provincial Bamiyan province, they have their Shia population. On the contrary, if we set aside the sectarian angle, Iran itself has improved dramatically relation with Pakistan, which Pakistan is very happy for. That you have Pakistan's balanced foreign policy does include that we want to have a relationship, all inclusive, mutually inclusive. We are not excluding any country. It is not against India. It is not against United States. It's not against any Western power for that matter. This is Pakistan's sovereign right to establish relations with the countries which Pakistan considers in future would help them in terms of stability, economics, trade, defense, and security.
Mr. Andrew, Central Asia perhaps is now becoming the new model for development, and also, I would say, the new market. Pakistan improving its relations with the Central Asian states, with Russia for that matter, and the countries that I just mentioned. These countries, how do you see them? And the prospects for development of Pakistan with the Central Asian states? And what are the challenges over there?
Well, I think it's very natural that Pakistan has an interest in Central Asia. After all, Pakistan shares a civilizational heritage with the region through Babur. So this is just the extension of a natural geopolitical, economic, and we can even say civilizational processes of connectivity being facilitated by Silk Road infrastructure, in this case, CPEC, and the possible expansion of CPEC to include Central Asia. Right now, we see that the main real sector economy, the most promising one, I would say, is Uzbekistan. It's the largest country, has the largest market potential, labor potential, so on and so forth. However, Kazakhstan happens to trump it when you put natural resources into the equation. That being said, I think that if Afghanistan were to be stabilized and if transport routes could be secured, potentially through striking a pragmatic deal with the Taliban and eliminating Daesh, Pakistan has infinite possibilities for connecting with Uzbekistan and the rest of the larger Central Asian region, but therein lies the challenge, security in Afghanistan. Now, devising a temporary workaround through China and then through either Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan, that is feasible, but everyone needs to aim for the most direct type of connectivity possible. Now, what I want to emphasize is that Russia has always had a sphere of influence, for lack of a better word, in this region, and that's natural. But these processes are win-win, and they are mutually inclusive. Now, as Mr. Akhtar was talking about, you have China, Russia, Iran, and Pakistan all kind of coming to a strategic convergence vis-a-vis Afghanistan, and this is creating a lot of interesting prospects for the future. There was a proposal a couple years ago about a so-called golden ring, and I think that that's what we're seeing. The golden ring.
The golden ring.
Yes, this is the beginning of the golden ring.
This is the emergence of the golden ring.
Yes, emergence of the golden ring, and I think that's really what everybody needs to look for, creating new multilateral institutions that cooperate on a shared security and economic basis. Security basis is against terrorism, separatism, and extremism, as defined by the SCO Charter, of which Iran is an observer member, and Turkey as well. Turkey is a dialogue partner, I believe. And then you have the threat of Daesh, of course. This inspires the countries to work closer together.
And Shamil, let me add with this. He should continue about, Andrew, about this drugs. This is the number one
huge.
Concern.
That's huge.
It's a huge concern for Iran.
Huge asymmetrical threat for Russia, too.
Asymmetrical threat. And the dangerous thing is that the finances coming from drug actually helping Daesh and all these outputs in the region. Also, the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and Uzbeks. Yeah. And these are really dangerous. So, on the one hand, if you have a golden ring, if it's not very ambitious, convergence, which is natural, it will exactly, as you said, it will exactly help all these four countries to address their real concerns on the border migration, the refugees crisis, and also the drug.
So you see primarily two big challenges. One is the connectivity, and the other one is the terrorism.
Security.
Terrorism, which is affecting the connectivity.
Yes, and I think we can even extrapolate even further. And if we accept that some of the terrorism is state-funded, state-supported, or whatnot by countries that have an interest in destabilizing the region and undermining this multipolar golden ring process, I think we can come to the conclusion that sometimes unconventional warfare means are being used to advance geopolitical objectives. In this case, disrupting the Silk Road, hybrid warfare against Pakistan, and against the region as a whole. But therein is the issue. You have these unpredictable processes, and the outcome has been more unpredictable than any of the possible initiators could have thought. Who could have thought 10 years ago that all these countries would be coming together, that Iran and Pakistan would put some of their previous disagreements aside, that Russia and Pakistan would do that Russia and China would be so close, that Pakistan would once again have an interest in Central Asia? This is a direct result of the problem stemming from Afghanistan, the support of terrorism there, and the export of the aforesaid throughout the larger region that catalyzed these processes to begin with.
Mr. Athar, when we talk about the regional prospects, we also talk about the spoilers, which Mr. Henry was just hinting at. The issue is that when we talk about Afghanistan, we're coming to Afghanistan again and again because this is the issue in the region.
It's a source of instability.
And Pakistan, while we have fought most notorious terrorist organizations and individuals in the region, that too single-handedly, Pakistan, and successfully, we also expect our neighbors to do the same. So when US talks about giving India a larger role in Afghanistan, what does that mean for Pakistan and for the regional countries?
No, whatever he was hinting, actually, let me spell out that hybrid warfare and all kind of illegal intelligence network operations in Pakistan, inside Pakistan, have become very much reality. They are gone beyond rhetoric anymore, because when you capture a serving commander and you also capture unearth a network, and you can see the violence is dramatically diminished, decreased. It's not accidental.
You're talking about Kulbhushan Yadav.
I'm talking about arrest of,
Balochistan.
Capture of Kulbhushan Yadav, the neutralization of his network, which is still underway because, of course, it's a very tedious work, because it's not a police work. It's a tedious work of understanding the complexity of their front companies, their stooges, their assets inside Pakistan, and then using third country and third countries to attack Pakistan. That is why I said that the challenge number one for US, NATO is to stabilize, but also sincerely understand that involvement of stakeholders, Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, is a strength to them. They are no more in contestation, competition, unless or otherwise they have their own agenda, which I'm not privy to. And I imagine there won't be one. It's my, I'm an optimist, so it's my assumption. And you asked for this, that why Afghanistan coming back and forth in our discussion. It has been, we did countless program on that. Well, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East has taken away many times the focus of the US. It is exactly the replay of the late 80s and early 90s when they open project after project, back-to-back war project. What it does is, it takes away the focus. It also demoralizes those forces which are trying to create a conducive environment for a futuristic vision for the next Afghan generation. Believe it or not, or maybe we cannot discuss anything. I'm more concerned with the young youth, new generation of this South Asia. If there ought to be an Asian century, it cannot be without stability of Afghanistan and leave Pakistan alone by the spoilers, not to hinder our progress by sabotaging or staging subconventional warfare and hybrid warfare in this country, because it will help this region, and by default, it will serve the coming generation. Youth will be employed, there will be a peace. So that is very, very important.
Mr. Henry, Pakistan and US relations have seen some ups and downs when it comes to Afghanistan. The do more mantra from the American side, and also that Pakistan had made few things very clear to our friends, that Pakistan would not become the scapegoat in the region. and Pakistan would look after Pakistan's interest in the region. And Pakistan would not fight anybody else's war on the Pakistani soil. How do you see Pakistan-US relations in the future? And one thing that many people in Pakistan ask is that what actually is the strategy, US strategy in Afghanistan? Because 17 years on, we don't see any end in sight of this war that is going on.
Yeah, well, you know, I take a very cynical take on things. I believe that one of the ulterior objectives of the American intervention in Afghanistan was to inspire control chaos, or in other words, self-sustaining processes of unrest that can spread throughout the country and thenceforth through the region for the reasons that I explained before. Also, we need to keep in mind that Afghanistan has an estimated $1 trillion worth of minerals, some of which are rare earth minerals. In connection with that, we also shouldn't forget that the gentleman who founded Blackwater, I'm forgetting his name right now, Eric Prince, I believe.
Eric Prince.
Yes, he suggested to Donald Trump, and he has Trump's ear through his sister Betsy DeVos, as the education secretary, that American forces and NATO forces should be replaced with mercenaries. Now, if you replace them with mercenaries and you're fighting the war on the cheap,
in order to provide security to the Afghan forces.
yes, and to also provide security for mining operations. Now, I think that there are reasons why the U.S. wants to remain in Afghanistan, namely strategic presence, export of instability for strategic means. To summarize, spoiling your competitors' projects. I mean, CPEC and expansions of CPEC are going to string the region together through the Golden Ring. So long as Afghanistan remains a source of instability, these projects could theoretically be threatened. Now, that goes to U.S.-Pakistani relations. The U.S. wants to take a so-called hard line against Pakistan, but ironically, America First is clashing against Pakistan First. And the thing is, the U.S. needs Pakistan more than the reverse. However, Pakistan, as Mr. Akhtar emphasized, is not doing anything against America. Pakistan is all-inclusive and just trying to diversify its foreign policy, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, the U.S., in response to this, also anticipating this process ever since the announcement of CPEC, has decided to diversify the war-fighting contribution in Afghanistan by bringing in more Indian influence. I think that's very destabilizing, but I think that India feels that it has a measure of strategic death in Afghanistan, and that's why India, as we know from what Qabul Yadav has admitted, is trying to destabilize Balochistan as part of a larger hybrid war on CPEC. Now, if we're going to talk about Balochistan, destabilization, and CPEC, we shouldn't forget Dr. Juma Baloch. He's based in Moscow, and he recently defected from the separatist struggle. He's no fringe figure. He designed the separatist flag. And in his own words, I spoke with him, and he said that India had hijacked what he saw as his lifelong struggle, and that in parallel with that, the Pakistani state, through CPEC and newfound opportunities, are providing the benefits and the promise that he always wanted his people to have. Therefore, he has completely cut ties with separatist organizations and is creating an overseas Baloch organization to encourage other Balochis abroad to cut their ties with rebel, insurgent, and terrorist groups, and maybe even repatriate themselves to Pakistan and go back to their homeland. And when he defected in Moscow, I was there. I was there for the conference he gave, and I have to say it really was beautiful. Everyone was cheering him on, and he was just welcomed back with open arms by all the Pakistanis that attended all throughout Russia. They were invited to attend these celebrations, and I thought that was amazing, and I think that the creative solution that Dr. Juma is spearheading might really be a way to mitigate some of these security threats, reinforce the security of CPEC, and therefore make this larger Golden Ring trend a stronger reality.
Mr. Akhtar, shortly and briefly, India's role in the region. What is India's role in the region? While Pakistan, China, Russia, and all these countries are working on mega economic activity and peace and development, do you think that India is getting isolated day by day and not being a part of this issue?
No, maybe I would say, to be honest, the objective assessment that it may not be isolated that much, but India understands that it may fall out from the actual framework of regional cooperation. And that is what may happen. And you can call it an isolation, or you can also call it the failure of Indian agenda.
Right. Mr. Akhtar Javed, thank you for joining us. Mr. Andrew, thank you for your time. Pleasure having you on the show. Today we discussed about the spoilers and also the people, the countries which are working for peace and development in the region. Russia, Pakistan, China, Iran are looking for peace and stability in the region. Pakistan has embarked on a mega economic activity. Pakistan has been fighting terrorism and extremism successfully, and we also expect our neighbors to do the same. Thank you for watching today's program. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.